6ix9ine is a figure in the rap game that's very controversial. It seems like there's nothing about this guy that people can actually agree on. Some people love him, some people hate him, some people can't stand him, and some people think he's entertaining. But one thing we all have to agree on at this point is that he's definitely fallen off. People can't even necessarily agree what the reason behind that is. A lot of people think that he was always destined to burn out, that there was no way that he was ever going to keep those antics going, and eventually people were going to get tired, bored, and not pay attention to him anymore. While other people blame the snitching for being the sole reason his career fell off, and then there's the people who think his music was never even good in the first place, so he was never going to be able to make it as a full-on rapper. And I think there's definitely elements of all three of those things that played into his eventual fall off, but I think there is one moment that fully killed his career, and that was the album known as Tattletales. Because to me, a rapper's career only dies when they truly let their fans down, the people who support him no matter what. The fame is sure to come and go, but there will always be a group of people who want to listen to your music, and if you can keep them around and keep them happy, you can keep making money and being a full-on artist. But if you let them down, well, you have nothing left. But I think now, looking back at his entire career with hindsight, we can see he never really cared about his fans. He only ever cared about the haters, making them mad and getting the most attention he could. He never cared about the people who actually liked what he was doing. But before we get to all of that, we need to get a little bit of context. So as we all know, 6ix9ine rose through the ranks of the rap game in 2018 with his aggressive style, endless antics, and crazy look. And while it is very true, even as far back as 2017, 6ix9ine's antics always came before his music, the music was still good. And I think some of 6ix9ine's biggest haters would even admit that Gummo and Kuda were hits. But after that, the style did start to get a little bit tired, but 6ix9ine was pretty good at switching it up from time to time. You can definitely believe that his entire career was built off of antics, but look at somebody like the Island Boys. They got everybody's attention in 2021, but their music sucked, so nobody stuck around long term, where 6ix9ine was able to have a whole year in the game. And yeah, some of that definitely came from the fact that he was beefing with half the rap game, but look at the numbers on some of these songs. People were listening to this music unironically. A lot of people actually liked it, and that's just the way you have to do it as an artist nowadays. You have to get butts in seats, get people to notice you, and then hit them with the actual good music, then they'll stick around. You just clout chase to clout chase, you're only going to have a very small career and last maybe a month at most. Anyways, eventually 6ix9ine would drop a whole project called Day 6ix9ine, which was full of a bunch of yelling, more aggressive style songs. After that, he started to move away from that style, making songs like Gummo, Fifi, and Stupid, which were a lot more melodic and poppy in style. All this led up to the release of his first big studio album, Dummy Boy, which was a big departure from his normal sound. It was less aggressive, less gang oriented, and focused instead on more fruity instrumentals, and was mostly propped up by some real big name features with the likes of Kanye West, Lil Baby, Gunna, and Tory Lanez. And while this new style definitely scared away some of his longtime fans, I think this was the right choice for 6ix9ine when it came out, because let's be honest, the lyrical depth that he has is pretty surface level, and there was only so many times that he could make the same song over and over again with a different name. Because that was actually a pretty big complaint with Day 6ix9ine, with a lot of people saying all the tracks on that album sounded way too similar, so when it came to Dummy Boy, he had no choice but to kind of switch his style up. And by the time he got to Tatty, a lot of people were calling that sound repetitive, so when he put out Dummy Boy, he used his yelling a lot more sparingly, and the end result was a pretty solid project. But as we all know, before the album even got a chance to drop, 6ix9ine was caught up for racketeering and ended up snitching on his whole gang. This destroyed his entire reputation and landed him 2 years in prison, and for the next few years, fans and haters alike sat and waited to see what the rainbow-headed rat would pull next. Everyone knew his chances for features were destroyed, and there wasn't that good of a chance of him making a comeback, but he would have a lot of clout when he first came out. Let's be honest, I think if he had sat in there for 4 or 5 years, people would have forgot about him, and by the time he came out, people would have noticed, but he wouldn't have had that much clout around him. But lucky for him, he only sat until 2020, and when he came out, it was the perfect time to get all eyes on him again. Because we all know this song would have been big no matter what, but this was COVID, so everybody was sitting inside anyway, so when he came out, everybody had their eyes on him, everybody wanted to see what he was going to do, what was the song going to sound like, what antics was he going to pull, and finally, he dropped the track, Gooa. And it was basically exactly what everybody thought it was going to be. It was a big FU to the rap game where he talked about being a rat, called out a lot of people who called him out during the time he was in prison, and the sound of the song was actually pretty good. It was more fruity, there was some yelling, and a lot of fans seemed pretty satisfied. I mean, the lyrics were pretty doo-doo, but what do you honestly expect from 6ix9ine? Honestly, he could have came out and made the worst song of all time and people still would have noticed, but the song was actually good, the video was flashy, and even ended up breaking the YouTube view counter because it went so big. But there was one problem, it didn't hit #1 on the Billboard Hot 100. The one thing that 6ix9ine wanted, the one thing he never achieved in his career didn't happen, and he was not happy about it. He ended up making several videos on Instagram talking about the Billboard and how they rigged the system and how he actually deserved the #1. Then he attacked Justin Bieber, Ariana Grande, he was going after everybody. And this was a terrible idea, because I know 6ix9ine always talks about how he got blackballed, but let's be honest, he was never going to get playlists, he probably was never going to get that many features besides small artists and artists who don't really care about their reputation, but going after Billboard really actually blackballed him. 6ix9ine just didn't care, he needed a way to advertise his next song, and he had a plan to make it go #1 once and for all. So he recruited the one last friend that he had in the rap game named Nicki Minaj, and together they decided to make the track called Trolls. You see, Nicki Minaj actually was supposed to go #1 with the track Say So, but for one reason or another, they ended up cutting her name off of it, so she was also pretty pissed off at Billboard. And the plan to make this song pop up was to do what every other artist did: bundle merch, try to get people to play it overnight while they were sleeping, get the barbs involved because, as we all know, Nicki Minaj's fans are completely crazy and they wanted her to have a #1. Now, it actually took quite a long time for this song to drop, and it actually got delayed another time because of the death of George Floyd, so he decided to push it back a week. But when it finally did drop, how was it? How did it sound? Well, I'm gonna be honest with you, Chief, it was basically a Nicki Minaj song with a little 6ix9ine feature on it, and I definitely understand why they did that for optics, because they want the barbs to scream the song over and over again, and they don't really like 6ix9ine, so he only made himself have a little small part. But just because I understand why he did it doesn't necessarily mean that I like it, because for the first time ever, we're seeing that 6ix9ine is willing to put antics over his actual musical quality. You know what? It worked. The song actually went #1. For the first time ever, 6ix9ine had beat the industry and managed to push himself to the absolute top of the Billboard. And even though fans understood the song wasn't that good, they still celebrated alongside him because he had finally hit his peak, and it was a W no matter what. After all, who cares? It was just a one-off. This was the one time that 6ix9ine was going to pull something like this, make this kind of crap music to appeal to the Billboard, and then after that, he was going to go back to his old style. Once the album dropped, we were really going to get that old 6ix9ine. After that, he dropped Yeah Yeah, and for the points of this video, that song doesn't really matter. He had a little bit of a beef with Annual AA, and he lost another feature there, but that's more in the Spanish market, so the real next song that mattered was Punani. Because after months of 6ix9ine sitting in house arrest, he was finally going to be free. He was going to be able to go back to New York, shoot a video on the block, and even better than that, it actually was going to feature Tory Lanez. This was definitely going to be a return to style. He was going to be out with his gang, and this was going to be the old 6ix9ine that we all know and love. But unfortunately, as we all know, the Tory Lanez and Megan Thee Stallion situation would go down not long after that, and Tory, having his entire reputation thrown in the absolute toilet, told 6ix9ine there was no way he was going to get more hate on his name. And that lost 6ix9ine his last real ally. Sure, Nicki Minaj made a song with him, but that was more for marketing purposes. Tory Lanez was actually his friend, somebody who was actually going to make multiple tracks with him. But after that, his feature was taken off Punani, and it was left as only half a song. And when it dropped, it really sucked. Fat Punani Nani over and over and over again. It really sounded like a ringtone, not like anything 6ix9ine would ever make. And even the music video itself kind of sucked. It came off as kind of a diet version of his normal thing. Sure, he was on the block, but he was with a bunch of security guards, and hey look, it's Ernie Mac. That's actually kind of sweet that his friend stuck with him throughout the entire thing, but besides that, yeah, the video sucked. And I'm telling you, after this track dropped, there was basically a big elephant in the room in the 6ix9ine fan base. Everybody who was so hyped to see him come back were now kind of worrying about the new album and what it would sound like. Some people still believed it would be good, but a lot of us were starting to see the writing on the wall. Even worse than that, the song didn't even chart on the Billboard Hot 100. Not at 1, not at 3, didn't even make it. It was the first song he had dropped since Gummo that didn't even make it on the Billboard. Things were not going well for 6ix9ine. Hey, it's okay. It's just because Tory Lanez pulled out at the last minute. That's the only reason the song sucked. The actual album is going to sound good. He's going to go back to that screaming style. The album's going to be a hit, guys. I'm telling you, Tattletales is going to rock. 6ix9ine really had two choices here. He could either drop a Day 6ix9ine Part 2 type album with screaming and yelling and really appeal to his fans and keep them around and keep them satisfied, or he could try to make Dummy Boy Part 2, which would not be a good option. Because like I said before, Dummy Boy was basically completely propped up on features, and he wasn't going to get that this time. Sure, we knew Akon was going to be on the album, but there was no way he was going to get Lil Baby, Gunna, Kanye West. None of those guys were going to show up again. So there was some rumors that YoungBoy was actually going to appear on this album, and some people even thought Lil Baby would come back and do a feature, but at this point I think we were fooling ourselves. There was no way that was ever going to happen. But when the time came to advertise, 6ix9ine went out to O Block, or just some random block in Chicago, and pretended it was O Block, advertised some really ugly merch, and told everybody Tattletales was on the way. Who cares about any of that? All we wanted was the track list. Who was going to feature on this album? Who was going to be Team 6ix9ine? Was he going to be able to get anybody big? Was it going to be small artists? Was he going to get any features whatsoever? But 6ix9ine just wasn't dropping the track list, which was not a good sign. And in fact, he never even ended up dropping it. He actually made a website where the track list then got leaked. A lot of us thought it was fake, a lot of us thought it was real, but it ended up being unfortunately real because it was not very good. Got Akon on 2 songs, one that we already knew about, Smiles, who the fuck is that? And then we got Left Side, who is that? Okay, so the features aren't going to be good, but the actual album is going to sound good, right? It finally dropped, we listened, and it was the worst thing I've ever heard in my life. This was without a doubt Dummy Boy Part 2 with no features. There was Attitude singing, there was reused lyrics. Seriously, the song GTL and Locked Up Part 2 have the exact same 6ix9ine verse on them. Why would you do that on the same album? Even put DJ Academics as a feature on one of these songs. I understand that 6ix9ine and him are friends, but they would never do that when he was actually popping back in the day, and that was the only good song on the album too, and they put AK on there. They might as well have just put DJ Vlad, Adam22, and the rest of the commentary people on there. Why would you put DJ Academic? Anyways, okay, let's move on. The album sucked, and it flopped too. It got 55k 5K first week. Billboard decided to not count his bundles because of course he went out against them. What did he think would happen? He couldn't just keep screwing with them. He should have never done that. After that, 6ix9ine basically just faded away, and we were all left thinking, how did this album come out the way that it did? And the reason is because 6ix9ine never cared about his music after he came back. It was all about getting back on Instagram, getting all the clout around him, getting people to notice his face. He didn't really care about actually making music that sounded good. And I get it, he was on a bit of a time limit. He had to drop Gooa pretty quick because a lot of people knew he was free and he didn't want the buzz to kind of wear off about him being actually out of jail. But even with that, he still took long breaks between, so he had a lot of time to actually make music. He was in the house all day anyway, so there was no reason he couldn't write some music. But I think it just comes down to the fact that 6ix9ine didn't really have those ghostwriters, those good producers. He couldn't really make good music because he didn't have a team. And I get it, he probably didn't know what to talk about. He wasn't in the studio with a bunch of gangsters making hard ass music anymore. He was just sitting in his house with his girl and maybe DJ Academics on the phone trying to make the best tracks that he could, but it just didn't work out. But to be honest with you, the writing was always on the wall. Back in the day when Zillakami and 6ix9ine got into a beef, Zillakami actually said it used to take an entire day for 6ix9ine to record just one verse. Of course, Zillakami could be capping, after all they don't like each other, but look back at 6ix9ine's original music. Gummo was original, Kudo was original, but Kiki was actually a reused song that was called On the Regular that he dropped before he even got famous, and then there was Booba, which was a reused song called Slumped Up that had Lil Wop, then he took him off. Then there was Dowie, which was supposed to be Anarchy XY, which also was supposed to drop. He was reusing songs left and right. One of his biggest tracks ever, Gotti, was actually a reused verse from a song called Got 'em. I mentioned that he basically reused the same lyrics over and over again every time that he did a feature with a European artist. This guy just couldn't write that much music. So all that's to say, by the time Tattletales was going to come out, he only had a couple months to make it, mix it, record it, produce it. I'm not giving him any excuses, but the guy couldn't write music that fast in the first place, even when he was famous and had every resource around him. So trying to do that in house arrest with no producers was always going to be an impossible feat. There was one thing he could have done. He could have made his fans happy and made a track in that yelling style. If he had done that, he still would have had a fan base, but it just comes down to the fact he didn't care. He never really cared what Tattletales would have sounded like. It was all a marketing gimmick to get it high sales, get him #1 album on the Billboard. The music was always secondary. And sure, he did come back a couple months later and drop the track Zaza, which was more in that yelling style, but by then it was too late. He should have done that in the first place. So how did 6ix9ine thank all of his fans? The people who supported him, the people who stuck with him, the people who still listened to his music even after he snitched, the people who really cared about what he was doing. How did he thank them all? Well, he actually blamed them all for all of his music flopping. He went on a DJ Academics live stream and basically said he wasn't going to drop any more music because his fans never went hard enough for it, and it was their fault that he was never going to drop music again. What a upstanding gentleman. Yeah, that's basically it. And then he dropped Blackball this year, and that was the worst album I've ever heard, so 6ix9ine has not learned a single thing. Yep, so that's why he fell off. Lost his fans, lost the people who hated him, didn't try anymore, and if he couldn't have the clout, he wouldn't even do it. I think at this point, 6ix9ine could have had a career where he still would have got 10 million views on everything he dropped. He still could have had fans, he still could have made yelling music, and sure, he never would have been accepted by the industry or got features, but he could have had something. But at this point, we all have to admit the 6ix9ine fall off has happened. So go listen to Anakin Skywalker instead. He's a lot better of an artist at this point, and he also kind of does that 6ix9ine style type shit. Shout out Knife Gang. Thanks for watching. Talk to you next time. I have a Discord server. Go join that if you want to see my videos when they're posted, and that's it. Bye.